Hey everybody, it's Heretical Weekends number 27, where we are currently discussing in the pre-show why you don't eat 2 movie theater hot dogs the night before you do a Google Hangout.
Or ever.
Because
Or one.
because bad things happen. I'm pretty sure there's a small alien gestating inside my midsection as we speak, so lucky for me. But on this show today, what was it? Free will, according to Sam Harris, flat Earth craziness, the diminishing of God's power, and if we have time, the Trey versus Ozzy thing, and more on Ozzy and less on Trey in that aspect, because I think Ozzy brought up some good points. And before I forget, fuck Arcane Logos. As well.
Yeah, you almost missed it last time. That was
I
scary.
know!
That was scary.
That actually stuck in my head for like 3 days, dude. I was like, oh shit. But
That was a close one. We would almost had to just cancel the rest of the.
yeah,
Over.
you know, it just something doesn't feel right in the universe if I don't say fuck Arcane Logos at least once a week. So, like, you'll be surprised. Like, I'll walk in the bathroom and stub my toe. And I'm like, fuck Arcane Logos. You know, it's just like it just works on so many levels. Oh, another bombing in Syria. Fuck Arcane Logos. You know, see how it just works.
Yeah, that's true.
So, so we're started at noon today, in hopes that things would be easier for us on the in America, I believe, because we're Americans and we're self-centered like that. But mostly because I think everyone's just getting out of church.
Yeah, definitely.
And we want to sleep in another hour. Being as I'm the only one that doesn't have, you guys have offspring, correct?
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't?
I do.
No.
Oh, you do.
The
Okay.
other guy does, and I don't.
Yeah, I don't have any kids either, so it's really easy for me just to get up and then walk my dog and play some video games, and you know, it's a little too early for internet porn, so we'll save that for later.
Right.
But anyway, so Sam Harris, I watched that video that Turtle you posted, and what it is it's kind of like a synopsis of his take on free will, and it's mostly from two lectures he did, but they were kind of like, you know, the points were kind of cut together, and then like.
Yeah, that's a little weird. I don't know exactly why the person did that, but yeah.
Because it looks like it brought up a lot of his talking points, basically.
Yeah, kinda.
But I doubt he could have posted like the whole, you know, hour long. You know what I mean? Like but I think he just wanted to get like the snippet of it, you know, the major points. And so help me out if I'm understanding this correctly, because you had mentioned last show that you were kind of in line with his thinking, and I kind of want to, you know, I mean, how about you take me through it to your understanding, and then we'll go from there.
Well, pretty much what I was saying last week is essentially that any action that we do, any decision that we make, we're really kind of in a way deceiving ourselves into thinking that we could do it some other way. So, for instance, the way I phrased that sentence, like it seems like in the moment it seems like I could phrase it any way I want to, but the process of my decision making is already, all of the factors are already in place when I'm making any decision that I make. And so to say that I could do it differently is really to say that I would be a different person in a sense, or have a different state of mind in that moment. So, and to me, and I don't know that Sam Harris got too much into this, but to me, the perception of free will is more to do with our being consciously aware that that we do make decisions, and so it appears to us, because we're conscious, that we have some sort of conscious control over our decision making, when in reality our decisions are are not really any different than any of our other functions, like our heartbeat or creating red blood cells or anything else.
He said he uses your height, I think, also like kind of as an example, but
Yeah.
along those same lines, right?
Yeah, I mean, and his lecture goes on for a long time, so I'm not covering everything that he said, but I mean that's kind of the underlying thought behind it, I think.
Yeah, one of the things that a couple of things that he said that stuck out to me was you can't control your thoughts, right? So they just sort of kind of pop in your head.
Right, they just essentially arise without our conscious control over them.
Right, and he kind of popped in a joke where he said, hey, you're probably thinking he does look a little like Ben Stiller or something like that, which I thought was kind of funny. But one of the things that he did say that he mentioned that was really fascinating to me was you can't map free will to anything. He didn't use the word scientific. He said you can't map free will to anything. Gosh, I'm sorry, I don't remember the terminology. I don't want to say like biologically or anything, but there's a term that he uses, so I don't want to misquote him because I don't want to be quote mined or whatever, but you can't map it to anything, right? So like he mentioned that they did a very simple experiment, or where people were given a very simple choice, right? Like this button or that button, and they had this machine set up to read your brain pattern and stuff, and moments before you actually made the decision, quote unquote, to choose which button to press, your brain had already made that decision already from a biological standpoint, right? So they can see which parts of your brains light up and this and that. So along those lines, while you think you made a choice, your brain had already made that choice.
Yeah, your brain makes the choice before you're aware of the choice being made is essentially
yes
the point of
exactly
that.
So you think consciously, from a conscious standpoint, that you're making a choice, but in reality that choice was made already.
Yeah. I mean it's made by you, but by parts of your brain that you're not consciously in control of, essentially.
Right. And I like the idea that he brought in the soul for a second. I'm not sure if he got that far in the video or the lecture, but he said even if you believe you have a soul, it doesn't help your situation any, right?
Right.
Because everything's still the same, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, no matter what your religious beliefs or beliefs as far as souls or not having souls, it doesn't really change the underlying facts of reality that there's still nothing to map free will onto.
Now, go ahead.
I was just going to say, at least the way that free will is normally thought of. Like I was saying last week, if your definition of free will is simply the ability to make decisions, then I would say, yes, we do have free will, but so does the computer in front of me. And most people would not be comfortable with labeling a computer as having free will.
Right. Yeah, and now how does that contrast from a neurological standpoint? A lot of people, because I brought this up to, believe it or not, I met this girl I talked to her for a while, who was a sociology, and she wanted to be a social worker, so she had to take a bunch of classes that involved like cultural studies and sociological studies. But she asked me, she likens it to determinism, and I know that that's not necessarily linked because one's philosophy and one isn't, but how do you think that relates to determinism from that sense? Like, does it tie in at all? Does it?
Well, I mean, to me, the problem with determinism, and I would love to live in a universe where I could strongly say that it is deterministic, but the underlying problem with determinism for me is quantum mechanics and the uncertainty within quantum mechanics. Because as far as we understand, at the basic level of everything, there is a level of and this kind of ties into if we get into some of the talking about what like Trey's recent hangouts, what they've been talking about. But there is a level of uncertainty at the most basic level of reality as far as we understand it. But that doesn't really change. Like one of the things Sam Harris says is that when we're describing reality, there's on one hand you have a knob of essentially cause and effect, and on the other hand you have this knob of randomness. And no matter how you adjust those knobs to try and account for reality, no combination of those two equals up to free will. What was your takeaway, Gavagai? You watched the video, didn't you?
No. I've seen clips of him talking about it before, though I didn't have time to watch that
the whole
one.
Video.
I have a portion of the video ready if you want to see it, actually. If you want to get caught up.
So here's my thing. I understand, there's causality, or this idea of kind of determinism, and then kind of randomness, and we really don't want either one for what we conceive of with regard to free will. But I think at some point, being conscious beings that are aware of ourselves and can contrast ourselves with our surroundings, and to take into account possibilities, we can weigh decisions, and I think that's all we need to do to get us to the thing that we think of as free will. And I don't think that it happens in the kind of way that causation necessarily happens. And maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I guess a neurosurgeon might be more informed, would obviously be more informed about this than I am. But I think that there's that kind of missing piece of the equation, which is consciousness. And like I gave the example last week when we were talking about looking at the different levels of kind of or ranges of behavior among species, and more simple species have very limited ranges of behaviors that can be observed. Things like worms and bacteria. There's only so many different things that they can be observed to do, and as you get up into birds or mammals and those kinds of things, you see much wider ranges of behaviors, and you see the norm, and it's kind of this bell curve thing, and then you see deviations from the norm. When you get up to humans, we have huge ranges of behaviors, and even for individuals there's wide ranges of behaviors, and individuals that make one decision at one point make another decision at another point within a very short period of time. Sometimes you choose to eat the same thing for a couple of days, and then you choose to eat something else, and it doesn't seem like there's anything to prevent us from changing our behavior at will, for lack of a better term.
Sure. I mean, my main objection to that still is that when you're talking about, for instance, like what you eat, you're still at any one of those given moments that, let's say, you had for 3 days in a row, you ate 2 hot dogs from the movie theater. And at every time you did that, you felt sick. And so on the 4th day, you decide to not eat hot dogs from the movie theater. The difference between the first time and the 4th time is that you've had a change in your experience. So to say that, we'll just call this person heathen. Heathen on day 1 has a different set of experiences than Heathen on day 4. But if you took those experiences from day 4 and implanted them to Heathen on day 1, my opinion and my belief is that Heathen on day 1 would not eat those 2 hot dogs. It's a matter of this individual's experiences are different at this point, and therefore they are making different decisions.
Right, but so not hot dogs is the choice, but maybe a bowl of cereal, maybe he opens a package of lettuce and makes himself a salad. There are a whole wide range of things.
Yeah, but no matter what he picks, though, he's going to do that for reasons. Most of them he's unconscious to. Most of the decisions we make, we don't really understand why we. I mean, you can, as an example, map some sort of, like, I can rule out hot dogs, but I will still end up choosing one thing or another. Now I go into my kitchen and I have a certain amount of choices. So unless I decide I'm going out to the restaurant, that's going to narrow down my choices. No matter what, those choices are. I mean, again, let's go with day 4 here. This is day 4 of the experiment, and he then decides not to have hot dogs. So he decides to have something from his kitchen. So in his kitchen there are a limited number of things that he can choose, and so he's going to choose one of those things. So if we rewind day 4 over and over again, and he's exactly at that mental state, every time he still only has those choices that are in his kitchen, and whatever he ends up deciding, all of the conditions that lead him to deciding that are going to be exactly the same on day 4, no matter how many times you rewind it.
That's an unfalsifiable claim, though, because
It absolutely is. Yeah. It absolutely is. But that is my position.
Sure. Well, okay. But the other thing is,
I mean, I guess what would make that not true, I guess, is the reason I can't.
Awareness, consciousness, and intentionality. So we can be that we are intentional and we are at least capable. And then I'm not saying that this is every decision that we make or every action that we take, but we have the capacity to deliberate and to think about and to make choices. And in some cases, we could use a coin toss as the method of selecting. There are irrational ways that we can behave and make choices and take action, and then we can also make rational choices and base them on reasons and deliberation.
Sure, but if you're talking about an irrational way of making a decision, you're not talking about free will in that case.
No, well,
But even that, and like I said, I would love to live in a deterministic universe, but quantum mechanics makes that difficult to argue for. But let's talk about a coin flip. So if you've got a quarter on your thumb, and you flip it up into the air, it's following the physics of wherever you apply the force on that quarter, it's going to, like, if we talk about, for instance, the Packer game where the Packers ended up losing and the referee flipped the coin and it went up, straight up, and came straight back down. Now, outside of quantum mechanics, if we ignore quantum mechanics for a moment, I would argue that if we rewound that moment every single time, that is exactly what would happen every single time. That quarter would go up and come straight back down. Because the physics that he applied to that would be the same, because his decision process is the same. So, for me, I would argue that even if we apply quantum mechanics and say, okay, well, there is some sort of, when he flips the coin, certain atoms are behaving differently or whatever, and so it doesn't apply exactly the same force, and so there is some sort of turning over, but that still doesn't get us anywhere towards a free will.
I don't know. I mean, to me, I look at the range of behaviors, and I ask myself, what would I expect to see in a universe where people had the ability to choose, and I can't figure out what I would expect to see.
I mean, that's
were free will to be true, and I can say that if free will were not true, I have a little bit of trouble seeing that there would be so much diversity among within the range of behaviors and things for humans in particular, but even for some animals. I would say that some animals have some limited range of free will. The fact that my dog, or my dog's a bad example because he kind of does whatever he wants and doesn't necessarily listen to us. But there are dogs that will not get up on the couch whenever their people are home, and and then they will choose to get up on the couch in some cases when their people are gone. Now, they also probably make the choice to stay off of the couch sometimes when their people are gone, and they might try to get up on the couch when their people are there sometimes, depending on their training and kind of demeanor or the particular character of that dog. But I mean, I think that that is an example of one instance where a dog might have some ability to choose a behavior.
But isn't Sam Harris pretty much saying that feeling of choice, even that feeling that you have the choice, is also part of the illusion? Am I not mistaken in that?
I mean, there's a tricky bit of thought process in this, in that I would not say that the dog doesn't have a choice. It's that dog will always make that choice.
That's how I saw it.
If we rewind to that moment, that dog will always choose to make that move. And that's why I say, if we define free will as the ability to make a decision, then I would say we do have free will.
Yeah, well, I think the point wasn't that you don't have the choice. Well, I guess it is. And it's so tricky. You know what I mean? I think what I got from Sam Harris was that the choice was already made before you even made it, right? So you feel like you have the choice, but you really don't.
It depends on how you look at it. Because
damn it, I was so looking forward to solving this free will thing today. Damn it.
Yeah, I love talking about this, but it's probably something we could go on for hours and hours about. So I don't know.
Side note, I know that you guys. I know we're not going to talk about, if we get time to talk about. We have a bunch of stuff to talk about today, but one of them is Ozzy and Trey. But yes. I created the most bitchin' Trey meme this morning. So if you guys didn't see it, look at it, because I'm sheepishly self-promoting, because I'm making it. It's one of those "This is Bob" ones, and as I'm writing it, I'm laughing my ass off as I'm writing it. Did you see it?
It's a good sign. No, I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, when it comes up, it's I have to read it, but it says
it just popped up on my feed.
Oh, okay. Go ahead and read it.
You want me to read it aloud?
Sure.
This is Trey Jadlow. Trey claims, if happening happens before you happen, then your contingency cannot happen before it happens, because you are contingent, and contingency happens to be happening while it exists, because it cannot happen before the contingency of its happening before it exists. And you violate the law of non-contradiction. Be smart. Don't be like Trey.
That's an exact quote, right?
It just seems like it. It's like you read when you go back. Trey's funny because if you were to explain what Trey's like, if you were to explain like his conversation with anybody to somebody else, I imagine that's what it sounds like to a person that's never heard it. You know what I mean? Like, we'll get to his funky ass later. So, so I guess moving on, since we can't solve this free will thing. I think Turtle, you also threw up something in our little group chat thing for the flat Earth thing, right? So
Yeah.
I'm not a big rap guy,
No, me neither. I hadn't heard of this guy until this popped up.
I don't listen to rap at all. Like it took like almost a year for someone to explain to me who this Drake person was. I have no idea about any of it. I'm kind of a rock guy by nature. I grew up in the '90s, so anything with a yo-yo and a bass, I'm just kind of like, huh? So anyway, this rapper B.O.B, which I have never heard of, started tweeting earlier this week that he figured out that there was a flat Earth, and he has the pictures to prove it. And his pictures are basically pictures from varying elevations and distances, and him going, look, the horizon line is always flat. And that prompted Neil deGrasse Tyson to sort of respond and kind of correct him. So they got in this little tweet battle over the course of the week, which resulted in Neil deGrasse Tyson going, I don't know is it the new Daily Show? I don't know what show it was on.
No, it's the nightly show, which is I believe it airs after the Daily Show. I have yet to actually watch that, but
yeah.
Okay, that was actually really funny because he comes out and he does this thing, and then he does like this, and then at the end he holds out the mic that he's talking on. He goes, oh, and by the way, this is gravity. Like drops mic and like walks off.
Yeah, B.O.B had created a rap about flat Earth and Neil deGrasse Tyson, and so that was Neil deGrasse's response to B.O.B was to create a rap himself, and then like you said, he drops the mic at the end of it. It was pretty funny. Yeah,
it's really pretty funny. Where he actually says the Earth is not fucking flat. I mean, they bleep it, but it's funny to hear him say it, Now, if you allow me to go on a fucking rant here for a second, because I may get to Josh Feuerstein levels of anger just for a second, but so the problem that I'm having, and we brought this up earlier before, is where in the hell are these people getting their education, right? I mean, I assume on some level, I don't want to assume he graduated high school, but what the fuck? I cannot believe there's people that still believe the Earth is flat. I can't. I know we have people here on G+ and the Flat Earth Society and all these. They're morons. I don't get it. Like I mean.
Well, I would say that it's not that he still believes that the Earth is flat. I didn't follow this too closely, but I'd be willing to bet that he has been convinced by the YouTube G+ community. Like he stumbled on, or somebody pointed him to these videos, and if you're not skeptical at all, like some of those videos can be convincing because they show you things that seem like they're science-y and seem like they're informed, but they're just ignorant on some other level.
Sorry, go ahead. I was saying but William Lane Craig sounded science-y for a while, doing his tour of debates before, people really started to correct him. But it doesn't bother me that some fucking rap guy or whatever that I never heard of, decides to believe in a flat Earth. What bothers me are people that believe the fucking rap guy that believes there's a flat Earth. And to top it all off, when you got, when your closest supporters is fucking Tila Tequila and these other fucking idiots, like, who gets their science education from rapper B.O.B. and Tila Tequila? I mean, even take that aside for a second. We got guys here on YouTube. We got what fucking landscapers, fucking these other goobers that come on here and go off about flat Earth and stuff. They're morons. I don't know what to say. I don't get it. I don't mean to poison the well, or you can accuse me of ad homs. It just I'm not understanding at what point do you go, why would you even, not that let's say for a second it's not impossible, but what prompts someone to go, well, let me just fucking look into this flat Earth thing. You know what I mean? Like let me just take a look at this flat Earth thing. By the way, there could be lizard people in the fucking White House. Like the moon landing is fake.
The thing that gets me is that they have like this radical skepticism towards things that they shouldn't have radical skepticism about, and then the inverse is that they have, wild acceptance of things that are crazy, and it's just there's this guy that I've been corresponding with in some comment threads, and that's just his thing. I mean, like even Bigfoot, he was like, well, I don't know, maybe there is Bigfoot. Like, okay, well, what about alien abductions? No, well, that aliens don't abduct people, but there's definitely stuff going on, because how else do you explain the lights in the sky?
Right, and you thought, honestly, for at least a split second, this guy's a fucking moron. Even though your better judgment came into play and you go, I don't want to judge this guy, probably, blah, 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 this and that. But on some level, when you hear this stuff, right, like there's lizard people in the White House, is it fucking Arcane that went off the deep end with the lizard people and
Illuminati?
Illuminati. And there's a couple people online that are like, I think even Tilo Tequila was like, and someone on here on YouTube was, if you can send me a picture from the moon that shows the Earth is round, I'll believe you.
But they won't. Yeah. That's the thing. They don't. They reject everything that counters them. Like, I'm curious. Like, I've gotten away from the whole flat Earth thing because I need my sanity. But I for several weeks there, as you know, I was on those boards and watching some of those videos and responding to people. And I know that there was a group of them that were raising funds to get a weather balloon together so that they could take a picture from well above whatever, so they could see that the Earth was flat or round or whatever the case. We don't know. Nobody knows. But I'd be curious to see what happened with that. I don't remember who was involved in that, but
well, good for them though. At least and maybe, just maybe, if they did see a picture that they were able to take using their own equipment, maybe that would put it to an end if they could possibly get high enough up into the atmosphere.
I doubt it, though. Yeah. My suspicion is that one of two things would happen. Either that person would just suddenly stop, because I think that person was deluded but was trying to be honest about it. But or else they would come up with some kind of explanation, oh, the lens is we thought this was a normal lens, but it's a wide-angle lens, or not a wide.
Must have gotten warped in transit.
Yeah, or something, and they'd find some reason to reject their own findings. But
the lizard people intercepted the signal.
That's kind of when Neil deGrasse Tyson got involved with the B.O.B. My first thought was well, that's funny. But that's not going to mean anything at all to the people who are interested in promoting the idea of flat Earth. They already have written off Neil deGrasse Tyson. They think all of NASA, anybody who's involved with that, they're lying. They think they're intentionally lying. So for Neil deGrasse Tyson to get involved, that has no effect whatsoever on their own view of what's going on. Of course, Neil deGrasse Tyson's going to say that. He's going to
he's part of the conspiracy.
Right, he's going to throw out all this stuff, and it's actually, for most of those people, I think it's a great thing that Neil deGrasse Tyson got involved, because that brought attention to their cause, and so now you have news people reporting on flat Earth, and that's great news for these people. I mean, in their own heads, at least.
I'm trying to find this article. It actually just popped into my feed this morning. I totally forgot to get the link, but what it does is it's an article on it's a blog, but it references other articles that you can go to and regarding some studies. But it's about this guy talks about a theist, and he said, "Have you ever been in a situation where you talk to a theist or somebody, and even though you, for whatever reason, let's say they have a total misconception about something scientific or whatever, and you can completely show that whatever they're spouting is incorrect, like just to a point where there's no there shouldn't be any question, it can actually reinforce their incorrect belief because they're so shut off from like thinking about it." And so I'm trying to find the article because I want to post it, but it references some other studies that happened where they took like two groups of people, and they told and they sat group A down, and they showed a picture of this guy, and they gave like this history of this guy, and they said he ended up killing himself, blah 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 blah. They showed group B another picture of a guy, and they said they gave this real in-depth backstory, and then he became a politician. Now they got the groups together at the end, and they said, and they had them, I don't know what happened in between. Did they talk, discuss, whatever? But at the end of it all, they got the groups together, and they told them both of these stories are false, right? This guy didn't commit suicide. This isn't even the same person. This is all fabricated. But when they talked to the people that they on the study, they were still convinced this guy A committed suicide and guy B was a politician. The reason being is because behaviorally, once we have a belief that's strong that we hold on to, it is very difficult for us to let that go, despite being told despite being shown that it's not true. And it's really kind of fascinating because he applies that to theists, and he kind of gets into it a little bit. But
yeah, I mean it clearly applies to theists as well. But I mean everybody is susceptible to that. I mean, I find that I have to really try and not be biased when I feel like I've been convinced by something, and then I see counter argument or counter evidence or whatever. I have to really try and force myself to seriously consider counterpoints. So yeah, I can definitely see that.
Yeah.
As a real quick example, like for instance, we watched the Making a Murderer documentary, and it's got some very compelling evidence on the one side, and then since that's come out, there's been other like some counter evidence against that, and it's tough to be unbiased and try and look at things even-handedly when you've really kind of come down on one side or another.
Yeah, it was just all that stuff. I believe it's just like a human thing, but it does explain a lot of shit when you talk to these on YouTube, especially when you got guys like Scientist Sam or Fiona or some of the people that actually know, and they're like, no, this is not right, and the people that talk to are like, nope, DNA is a computer, or whatever the fucking shit they're spouting or whatever. Yeah.
Can't get new information.
Yeah. Yeah, that's also.
No, you can't have unguided things make guided things.
I so can't wait to make I'm gonna make a This Is Jungle Jargon one next. I decided to keep making those. I don't know why, but so moving along, since wow, we're actually kind of on time, which is kind of amazing. So there's a topic that I has been bothering me as of late, and I think we kind of scratched the surface a little bit, or you touched upon it in a past rambling of mine. But I came upon this bloggy article thing, which I will share for a split second because the graph is kind of funny. So it's God's diminishing power, and as you can see here, there's a timeline this way to the present day, and it says creating entire universe, flooding the planet, causing plagues, walking on water, curing syphilis, and then appearing on toast. And and so it was kind of funny because this guy in particular gets into like, back in the day, God was talking to Abraham, for a chat. He went this, Sodom and Gomorrah, and all this cool shit. And then, now it's basically, he's on toast, and the wind blew a certain way, and I knew it was God talking to me, and
found your car keys.
Right, and so for me, it got me thinking about when I was a kid. God was described very much like he was. I think it was in Isaiah, right, where it said anything is possible through God, or that kind of. Was that Isaiah? Don't you know, Gabby? Or are you coughing up a lung right now? Phlegm. Somewhere in the Bible, it says, all things are possible through God, or something like that. And so when I was growing up, God was the omnipotent, omniscient being that everyone claimed him to be, right? He can do anything.
It's Jesus in the Gospels who says that.
Yeah, okay. It doesn't matter what it is, there's no contradiction. He can do anything because he's God. And then as time went on, it's gotten to a point where, well, God can only do what's logically possible. God can only do what's in his nature, which is even less it's even a worse description, I think. But now I see in these Google Hangouts, right, where people just flat out saying, well, God can't do this, God can't do that. I think Skylar just had a talk with somebody where he's like, well, you're just diminishing God's power at this point. How can he be God if he can't do this or X or Y? And there seems to be a lot of ad hoc explanations now for this to get around the idea that, well, if you're claiming all these omni abilities, there's going to be a contradiction somewhere between the omni abilities. And they go, well, you got to interpret the omni abilities this way, and now it's cool. And then you go, well, here's another problem. And they go, well, okay, only within his nature. It just seems like this sort of ad hoc-y sort of explanation. Am I crazy, or did you guys? I mean, you guys grew up religious, right? So,
I think it has as much to do with where you find yourself engaging with people who are talking about these subjects. Because if you went to a normal church, I think most of those people there would be happy to tell you that God can do any and everything. It's when you get into the nitty-gritty of like you said, like the contradictions of the omni abilities, that then you have kind of these quote unquote more sophisticated theists kind of whittling out things that might be problematic. And I think that's been around for a long time. It's just probably you weren't so engaged in those conversations when you were younger, would be my guess.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a lot of great thinkers when I was hanging around back then, but don't you think at some point, though, like William Lane Craig or any of these guys who are on YouTube that subscribe to this sort of thing, they generally had that description in their head at some point?
Yeah, I think they do. I mean, I can totally see from their perspective, though, how they will say that those are really they've always held that same viewpoint, that even with kind of the weakest of those definitions where he can only do what within his nature, they would still view that as still being the same thing as God can do anything, in their own view. It's essentially I would think that the way that they think about it is, in a sense, God is capable of doing these other things, but he won't because it's outside of his nature.
It fucking doesn't explain a goddamn thing.
See, I am getting pretty good.
It doesn't explain a goddamn thing.
Well, the thing that I find amusing about it too is the fact, where are they getting that from? What is their source of information that says God can't do X? Because to me, they're just inventing that because it makes things uncomfortable for them when you point out these problems, and so they say, well, God can't do that, but they just made that up.
And that's more to my point. I understand that given time, arguments are going to be refined, definitions are going to be refined, and this and that. Generally, as Dillahunty will say, they recycle arguments. They find people point out flaws. They kind of reword them, recycle them, and then ship them back out. Like Kalam being a good example of that. What I'm more fascinated or whatever about is what goes on in these people's heads when you have a definition X. It's pointed out, okay, here's some problems with that, and they come back with definition Y,
But they're the ones who invent it, yeah.
That space in between, what goes through their head? Are they like, shit, he has a point, let me rethink this, and look this up on Google, and it never dawns on them, to the point we were talking about before, it never dawns on them that the person they were talking to may have a legitimate point, right? They can't give it up. They're not going to, so they're going to find a way to retool the definition to crowbar it, like square peg in a round hole kind of thing, and try to make it work. Now, I don't get the mindset from getting an X to Y in that situation.
Well, think about who's actually doing the reworking. I mean, it's the people like William Lane Craig. Part of me genuinely wonders whether or not he actually believes the stuff, or if he is, just kind of cashing in on the opportunity that is there when you have someone who is clearly a smart guy, who's able to, and willing to say, well, look, I have good reasons for believing these things, and the people who already believe it, jump on the bandwagon and say, well, great, that's what I want, is good reasons so that I can explain to people why I believe the things that I already believe, even though this is not why I believed it in the first place. So, but I have to say, and wonder, how genuine are some of these apologists, particularly the ones like William Lane Craig, and especially when you watch him engage with an audience and when there's open mic questions and things like that, because he will not allow for follow-up questions and things. There was at least one video where I saw, and this kid asked him a really good question about what he had said in his lecture, and then the henchman came around and pulled the kid away from the mic when he tried to ask a follow-up question. It was just like, well, what you said didn't even really address what I was saying. So I think he knows that there are holes in his positions and arguments, and he doesn't want to have them exposed publicly.
Yeah, I saw a video. Even if the person wasn't pulled away, they're very good at doing this thing. This is what I call the move. I think Matt Slick did the same thing where some student asked him, "Am I going to hell?" That's on YouTube, and they do this thing where they go, "Okay, well, let me ask you this, right?" Or they'll go, "Okay, well, here's my answer or response," and they go to like a 30-second diatribe, which really doesn't answer the question directly, right? In this case of Matt Slick, he never answered the question directly, where she reiterated, "Hey, that doesn't answer my question," and then he's like, "Okay, well, let me finish." Right, and they'll filibuster this 2-minute time frame where it never really addresses the question. It was a pretty direct question, and they go through like all this fluff, but never really answer anything, and that's what they're good at.
Yeah.
I think you bring up a good point though, Gavagai, in that a lot of these people who will kind of regurgitate some of these more sophisticated views, they're not the ones inventing them. They're getting them from people like William Lane Craig or Matt Slick or whoever. And it's interesting because it is essentially like the same thing as the way they get their belief in the first place. They get it from an authority figure who they think has insight into this stuff, and most cases it's their parents or their pastor or both, and then later when their views are challenged, they look to another authority figure, but they don't stop to think of like, well, is that actually what the Bible says, or does that actually when they're coming up with these like I said, more sophisticated descriptions of God, like does that actually match up to what other people have told me in the past, or does that match up to if there really is a God? So it's just kind of, they just take in from an authority figure. And
One of my sorry, good.
no, that was it.
I was one of my favorite things to ask people, whether it's fucking Trey or any of these guys on YouTube, that especially guys that preach hard about whatever argument they think they have that's like the clincher. I always ask them, were you a believer before you heard these arguments, or did this argument convince you, right? Because they seem to be the guys like Trey or whatever nowadays seem to think that whatever argument they have is supposed to be the knockout punch, like you can't defeat this, I win by, so whatever I say is true by default or whatever. But I'm sorry, I may have misspoke. Trey never actually really gives an argument, so I take that back. But but a lot of these guys are already believers ahead of time. Trey admitted to me once that he was already a Christian and a believer before this R.C. Sproul thing that he's spouting about. So a lot of these guys on here, especially on YouTube, are just trying to find ways to reinforce what they already believe and like sort of quote unquote win the argument. And you're right, they copy guys like R.C. Sproul and William Craig and and they go, hey, that guy sounds smart, let me say what he said. Essentially.
Yeah, because I mean, to some extent, those arguments, from the Christian perspective, a lot of those arguments sound compelling, and from the atheistic perspective, especially the first time you hear one of those types of arguments, it sounds confusing, and it's not convincing, but it's confusing, and you're left kind of thinking, well, that's not right, but I'm not sure exactly why it's not right. So it can be effective in that sense, like from the get-go.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you put. Have you ever been in a situation where you made yourself a bowl of cereal, or that kind of thing, and you weren't quite sure if the milk was bad, so you sort of eat the cereal and you sit there for a second in your head, you're like, this tastes bad, and then you may go to your friend or buddy or brother or whatever and go, hey, taste this. This tastes bad. That's kind of how I see these arguments. Like, even if you don't quite get it, like when I heard presuppositionalism for the first time, or Trey Jadlow's argument for the first time, even though you may not know exactly where it's wrong, there's definitely something wrong. Like, there's definitely a flag on the play somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, especially you can kind of tell just because they're weaving in and out of these, terms like so quickly that that there's some sort of link or jump or something somewhere, because they've jumped around using these terms that they're using them in odd ways, almost always, in ways that we don't use them normally to make their proofs. And like anytime that happens, it's always a giant red flag. Like, okay, well, there's a trap in there somewhere. And that's why when you watch some of these discussions, why they never get anywhere, because I mean, you can watch 100 Trey videos and they never get to the point he wants to get to, because there's always this long argument about what the terms are supposed to mean.
Yeah, well, technically you can't get to 100 Trey discussions, because by the 5th one, you've already drank a gallon of bleach just to end the pain.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. Don't listen to 5 Trey Jadlow conversation. Well, I think Trey knows. See, Trey's so full of shit, it comes out his ears. That guy he comes across as so dishonest to me, and not just because I'm not saying he quote unquote lies, but from the whole like, I'm just a simple guy, I'm uneducated, I'm ignorant, I want to learn. And then throughout the conversation, when someone is like busting out, like, he's trying to bust out these terms, and he's laughing at you. You're so sophomoric. You don't even understand the argument. listen. Does that sound like someone that's like, you know, this humble guy in the first 5 minutes of every conversation that's like, I want to learn. I just make teeth for a living, you know. So disingenuous just at that alone, you know. Much like it's been pointed. Oh well, I guess that's a good segue. Did anybody catch Ozzy and Trey?
Yes.
And did you catch that?
I did. I also watched the who was that? The Rumpus last night as well.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of that one.
That was kind of similar.
Dude, Gabby, I think you're probably the more philosophically minded out of all of us. Is that what'd you think of Ozzy?
Ozzy does great all the time, and it was beautiful to see. You know, the rest of us are not as well informed, and we also like. I've had some exposure to philosophy and as a undergrad and things, but I've been out of the kind of academic realm, and I don't have the ability to kind of reiterate and I don't have, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't just pull out these terms and things at will the way Ozzy can, because he's just so immersed and has been so immersed for so long in the field. Yeah, it's like, you know, the rest of us are just kind of barroom brawlers as opposed to the kung fu master of that is Ozzy, and it's almost like effortless, and it's just wonderful to see him go, you know, just wave his hand and pass these attempts at blows from Trey, and it nothing lands, and you're just like, wow.
If I was to give us an analogy here, we are. If you ever seen the movie Kill Bill, we are the crazy 88. We're the guys that go in and get our arms chopped off and legs. And not all of us, theists and atheists alike, that don't. But Ozzy is sort of like the bride when she gives Bill the 5-finger fucking punch of death. You know what I mean? Because it's his. And I'm not saying it's his life, but I mean that's one of his primary. You know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like. That's his thing, you know, and so we sit there and we do our best to keep up, and they're obviously, you know, Floyd's really good too.
Yes.
And I kind of wish he was here, that jerk. I know he'd have an opinion, but it was great. You know, I didn't even. Trey likes to point out. I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. Trey likes to point out this conversation that we had. Trey always claims that he never reads my responses on G+, and I know that's a lie because he responds to them every now and then. He has to at least read them. He may not respond to them, but I know he fucking reads them because he responds to them every now and then. And then he always likes to post this conversation that him and I had. And I explained a long time ago, you know, that was my very first Google Hangout, right? So when we spoke before then, I had said, you know, I'm just interested in learning about your position. Right, you know, I'm not here. You know, it's not a debate or whatever. I kind of just want to know. I kind of want to see what you're spouting. You know what I mean? So if anyone ever watches that, there isn't a lot of battle because that wasn't the intent of the conversation. Trey always posts that like he demolished me or something, and I'm like, there's no battle, dude. Like, I don't know what you're talking about, you know? Because if you ever see that, it's me just asking questions, going, okay. All right, you know, well, you know, did you? At one point, I said it just sounds like you're defining things into existence, or you're defining things in a certain way that only works within the framework that, you know, it. You know what I'm saying? Like he constructs this sort of very narrow sort of view of things, and then defines things that only work within that narrow view. And if you see anything that's outside of that, you're wrong, non-contradiction, right? So I'm really glad that Trey pointed out. Sorry, Ozzy. I'm really glad that Ozzy pointed out a few things. One being the difference between an event and an effect.
Right.
And there's no logic. What he said? There's no logical correlation. Like you can't. There's no logical. I don't know how he put it. There's no. Help me out, Gabby guy.
they can be two separate things, and
Yes.
not every event necessarily has a cause. We don't know. We tend to attribute events with causes because that's how we understand the world, but there's no guarantee, right? I mean, and and to say that everything that happens is causal already causes problems for his claim that his God just exists, because his God's existence, and this was Ozzy's example, your God is his existence is happening right now, right? So that's happening. You can't have your cake and eat it too here. It's either everything that's an event, everything that happens is caused, including your deity or your special pleading.
I brought that up during our conversation, and
Right.
our very first conversation, I said, basically that, you're providing these rules that apparently are absolute or can't change, or how Trey defines them is in stone, concrete, can't be wrong. But then when I bring up his God, he's like, nope.
Right.
Nope, self-existent, blah 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 blah.
Yeah. Well, and I think I don't mean to like undercut or undersell the conversations that have been had by the rest of us with Trey. And I think we've all pointed at and poked at these problems, but I think that Ozzy has a way of doing it that's so much more elegant than the way most of the rest of us do it, and he can articulate in technical terms, yet understandable terms, the way things are. I mean, the fact that he pointed out that Trey's just his use of the phrase "do you happen" or "does the universe happen," what he's like smuggling in all of these different ideas with that, and most of us kind of know roughly what he's getting at, but the fact that he's using those terms is in a way somewhat dishonest, because he's not spelling out what he's actually trying to say. He's not spelling out his argument.
Well, in the Rumpus conversation he had with Trey, or Trey had with Rumpus rather, he said that all he means by happening is change. But when again, I brought this up, how is that not special pleading to him? And he's like, because self-existent being, pure actuality, blah 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 blah. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, that didn't really answer anything, but let's move on, because it wasn't really a debate. It was just like, okay, I just want to kind of get what you have to say. But now on the flip side of that, Trey was accusing at one point Ozzy, I think, of special pleading in regards to that and the universe. And somebody wrote something somewhere that said the principle of cause and effect, how Trey is using it, applies to everything within the universe, or seems to, right? Not, you know what I mean? As far as Trey's description goes, but cannot be applied to the universe, or it can't necessarily be applied to the universe. I'm not sure if you guys read any of that stuff. Did I just lose the whole? Did I just?
No, I didn't see it, but
okay. So Trey, I think at one point said, okay, well that's special pleading, but Ozzy brought up, I don't know if it was Ozzy or if it was somebody else that wrote out why that's not the case. And there's no way I'm going to put it. Look, I have my dog as a picture of my avatar. I'm not putting that. I'm not able to word this correctly, okay? But somebody wrote something that, or said something that pretty much explains why that is not the case with the universe itself. Did you guys have any idea what I'm talking about here at all, or am I just speaking to the
I mean, I didn't see it, but I mean, the whole thing is it's special pleading. Like if you want to say that God is exempt from this, like how can you make the argument that the universe couldn't be exempt from it? I mean, we don't know what happened before the Big Bang, so it's possible that the universe is just exploding and then imploding and exploding and imploding infinitely. We don't know.
I
So
think that was the point.
it's like it's to try and come up with this hard line that, well, no, the universe, can't be X is ridiculous because we don't know. We don't know what happened before the Big Bang, or if there was a before the Big Bang, or if this universe is part of a multiverse.
Yeah.
So when you try and draw this hard line and say that no, it can't be this way, you're just making stuff up at that point.
I think that was kind of more of the point where Trey has this hardline stance where, it must be this, my God is exempt because X, Y, Z, which would be special pleading. It cannot apply to the universe because it's an unknown, right? There are events that happen. Until you can show that there's a cause, you can't make that leap, right?
Yeah, one thing that I was curious about, like last night I was listening to his discussion with the Rumpus. Like he seems to use the word contingent in simultaneously two different ways. One in that if something's contingent, it was caused to come into existence, which I think is the way most people assume he means it when he's talking about it. But then he also seems to mean it in that any time that anything that has something else affecting it, at all, is also contingent. So, which I don't think is what most people think he's talking about when he's talking about, but he seems to be using them simultaneously. But if he's my thought when he was talking to the Rumpus was if he's going to say that, anything that is affected by anything else is contingent, then how could his God not be contingent? Because
that's what I was going to say.
Because if he's going to say that, he can pray to God, or God cares whether or not he goes to church or murders somebody, then God is contingent on the actions of the people on the planet. God makes decisions based on what's going on the planet. God has emotional reactions to what's going on the planet. So God is contingent on the goings-on of the people on this planet.
Well,
I would assume.
Except that I think to that Trey would say that that's analogical language, and that those things don't actually happen. It's just the expression of what's happening in terms that humans can understand because we're too dumb to relate to a god or something that
he'll say
doesn't have those properties. I don't know.
But I asked, and I still ask to this day, how was he able to determine it was what is it, analogical language?
Yeah.
How was he able to determine that if he can't determine what the
because the Bible, that's what the Bible says. He got that from the Bible.
No. it's because that's the only way to get around the problem.
I mean, he's making shit up, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's his ad hoc explanation of, to do away from the problem or do away with the problem, so that he can persist in his belief.
Next time somebody's in a conversation and he tries to create some sort of explanation like that, they should request that he cite his source for that in the Bible.
Yeah, it's not there. Or the other nice response, my favorite example of when somebody's throwing out ad hoc explanations of things was Galileo, responding to critics, when he pointed out the fact that back in the day they thought that the moon and the sun were perfect spheres, and he pointed his telescope and there were craters and mountains and things on the moon, and he was saying it's not a perfect sphere, and they said, well, it's covered with a crystalline substance that makes it a perfect sphere, but it's invisible. And this is of course an ad hoc explanation to preserve their doctrine at the time, and he said, well, okay, you're right, it is covered with a crystalline surface, but the crystalline surface mimics the terrain, and so there are just as many mountains and caverns and craters in the crystalline surface, because it's just as arbitrary. It's their assertion, and so you could shoot back an arbitrary assertion back at Trey. Well, it's not analogical language, and I know just because reasons.
Just because I have a talking sandwich next to me.
Trey would be it'd be much more realistic if he just showed a picture of his asshole, because that's where he seems to pull out most of his ideas, like right out of his ass. But like, is that like an R.C. Sproul thing? Like,
no, I think he is really doing R.C. Sproul a great disservice, and I have not read much of R.C. Sproul. I've tried to look up some videos from him, but I think he is a more well-informed and would probably cringe if he knew that Trey was, and just for the fact that even Ozzy was familiar with him and seemed to indicate that Trey's representation of R.C. Sproul's positions and arguments was not doing it justice, that his understanding was limited of what R.C. Sproul is actually saying. So
yeah, you got to look at it this way. Seitenbruggenkate is like making Van Til roll over in his grave, I would imagine, but Trey is doing an equal or greater disservice to Sproul, but Trey doesn't have any, I say quote unquote, the charm of Seitenbruggenkate. Like, he's like a less famous Seitenbruggenkate that has sodomized someone else's work and tries to get attention on YouTube.
Well, and the funny thing is that you get these layers. So you have, what is it, Van Til, and then Seitenbruggenkate, and then Arcane Logos. as kind of the copy of the copy of the copy of the argument that just gets worse as you go.
Oh.
So we need a Trey clone that kind of hitches his wagon to Trey and makes his arguments, only does it even more poorly.
Can the Trey clone also grow a ginormous beard every week and then just shave it, then grow it, then shave it, and grow it? Then like every weekend, I was like, is this really the same person?
Chia.
Yeah, I don't even. The thing with Trey too, which I find super disingenuous, is when he says "my friend," he goes, "Yeah, see,
yes.
See where he's like, it literally makes you want to shake my monitor because I can't shake it. I can't just grab him on the shoulder and go, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" No, my friend, you're wrong. Or whatever. This whole faux sort of like attitude that he puts on, and then in the same breath, like, does this whole,
right?
The thing that annoys me the most about him is his scoffing.
Yeah.
That's just, grow up, man. Grow up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there are many of us here who are interested in genuine conversations, and when you come on and put on a facade of humility, and then are super arrogant in your discussion and things, it's so distasteful.
Yeah, and by the way, if Trey is ever, I don't know who knows if Trey will watch this or is watching this right now, but he loves this shit. He loves being talked about. He really does, and I think a lot of us have called it out already. A lot of it's attention seeking. Dragnot says the same thing. I think we really should have done a top 5 annoying things about Trey. Just had like a list. To go through each apologist or each YouTube theist separately. But this idea that he always says, I gotta go. I gotta go right now. And it's like he always claims like he has about an hour allotted, but as shown by the Ozzy thing, he was full of shit. He jumped right back in when he saw Ozzy. He's like, oh, let me get back in. And he was able to sit around, and you know what I mean? Like, he's just so dishonest, dude. Like, I hate to break it to you guys, but not you two, but other people, that dishonesty just doesn't mean directly lying. Although, in Trey's case, it's both. Like, just being disingenuous and actually lying. So, anyway, I got my Trey Jadlow out of my system. That's nice. So anyway, shit, that's all I have for this week. But do you guys have anything else? I think we're just about wrapped up in an hour and 15 this week.
That's all right. That's all right.
I mean, I'll be glad to talk. I'll be glad to spend the next 15 minutes yelling at flat earthers and shit. But I know Gavin guy is under the weather. I think Turtle, you said you were under the weather.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, and I have to help my girlfriend move, as well as bringing a new roommate to my own living establishment. So if this is the last broadcast you hear from me, it's because my new roommate stabbed me to death in my sleep. So, yeah. All right, guys. Well, thanks, everybody, for watching. This is amazing, a whole 11 viewers. We'll see you next week. You guys got anything you want to plug? Any rooms you're going to be in? Any debates? Anything all of that nature? I have a debate, not a debate challenge, but someone asked me to do a conversation with them that 98 weeks ago I made a comment on a Todd Friel video where it was Todd Friel versus Sherman. I forgot his first name is. And I made this comment about how, I don't know if you guys know who Todd Friel is, but he's Daddy is a fucking idiot. And, he made some, condescending, disparaging comments after Hitchens died and all this stuff and blah, 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 blah. But anyway, I said he needed to update his argument. This whole watchmaker thing, he just really should just stop at this point. Again, that was 98 weeks ago, which is it's a very long time ago. So this guy commented saying that he doesn't need to. We went back and forth, not maliciously, and he said he'd like to do a Google Hangout, so that may take place in the future. And that's pretty much all I got. So look for that. His name is Brandon Summers, so look for that.
All right, yeah, post it out there.
I will.
We'll share
I'm
it.
sure it'll go amazingly since, we get these deep philosophical conversations and stuff, and you guys go into this awesome conversation, and then I chime in, I'm like, what? That guy's an idiot, what? So, anyway, thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you all in 2 weeks. Have a good one.